Now, I'm only 27, but I'm about to shake my fist at the youth of America. I grew up before the internet, before cell phones, and um, before the age of the indoor raised child. I was a kid who spent a lot of time outside unsupervised with other kids. I was raised on Arnold Schwarzenegger films, Steven Seagal films, Jean Claude Van Damme films. I saw violence largely before I saw cartoons. And the cartoons I saw were G.I. Joe, Power Rangers, and that Power Rangers probably the last great violent kids TV show. I grew up watching Spider-Man and X-Men, where literally characters were not allowed to hit each other physically unless the character being hit was a robot. And I remember being kind of baffled by that and insulted because not only was I raised on, action movies, I was raised on Beavis and Butthead. And I was around a lot of adults who didn't coddle me or insult my intelligence. I mean, one of my earliest memories was, you know, I think I was about 2, and I was about to stick a key into a light socket because I wanted to perform an experiment because I thought, Beekman's World and Bill Nye the Science Guy, that was the coolest shit, and I was performing a scientific experiment about electricity. And my mother came up to me, and my mother didn't presume to take the keys out of my hand or tell me no or send me to timeout or something. My mother said, "What are you doing there?" And I said, I'm doing an experiment. I'm gonna stick the keys in the light socket because I want to learn about electricity." And she said, "Well, what do you think is going to happen if you stick your keys in that light socket?" And I said, well, it's gonna shock me, right?" And she's like, "Yeah, but did you know that a lot of times when people get shocked, that's being electrocuted, it can kill you?" And I said, "Really?" And she said, "Yeah." And she said, "So what are you gonna do?" And I said, and she's like, "Are you gonna put the keys in the light socket because it could electrocute you and you might die? Are you gonna do that?" And I said, "No." And she's like, "Well, will you give mommy's car keys back?" And I said, "Yeah." Now, see, I was, I think, 2 or 3, right about that time where I'm talking and I'm walking, but I'm stupid, But at the same time, she didn't insult my intelligence. She didn't protect me even then. And so I as this kid who grew up with no internet and no cell phones and I didn't even have cable until I was like 10. I wasn't a very spoiled kid, and I went to a school where kids were allowed to roughhouse and play fight each other and act out their fantasies without fear of being suspended for doing this pew 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 at another kid. You know what I mean? And that's my little piece of '90s kid nostalgia. And so I gotta wonder if I gotta credit me having this level-headed, cynical personality where I take ideas seriously and I take myself seriously and I take other people seriously. I don't insult people's intelligence, and I was raised around black people. My mom's best friend was a black man who wanted me to read The Hobbit and shit, and he was trying to get me into sci-fi novels I still don't give a fuck about. And I was around adults who drank, and I was around people who swore, and I was around people who talked to me, not necessarily as an adult, but not as this feckless, useless, helpless, and defenseless child, but as a person, if not an equal, but at least a person. And I was not necessarily cultured or taught to respect or taught even about religions and ethnicities, you know, but I wasn't taught that I had to respect people just because. I was just around different kinds of people and around adults who acted as adults and didn't coddle me. And I gotta wonder about what if all the warnings of comics in the late 90s and mid 90s were true about the easy jokes about participation ribbons and the easy jokes about commendations just for being around and for being told you were a special snowflake. I was told here and there that I could be anything I wanted to be, but not that much. I wasn't told I was special. And I gotta admit, I grew up around other kids and played unsupervised a lot. And I was a kid with a lot of phobias. I was scared of the dark. I was scared of heights. I was scared of bugs. I was scared of large dogs. So I had a friend who was a skateboarding wannabe punk who was being raised by his grandmother who didn't watch him much, probably drank. He had a big ass Siberian husky, and his hobby was going out with kids and either going to the skate park or walking out to go play laser tag or walking out to the mall or building tree houses. And I got over that fear of heights because it was like, climb up to the treehouse, you pussy. Do you want to hang out with your friends? Climb up to the treehouse, you pussy. And it wasn't, I'm comparing you to a girl's genitalia because girls are cowards. Ha ha ha. No, it was literally just, don't be a coward. Climb the tree. And, I was around kids who, I was kind of bullied for being a little bit nerdy or bullied for not being very cool or very athletic. But it wasn't really that bad. And if I was told don't be a faggot, it was don't be an asshole, don't be a contrarian, get along with people and join in, be a part of the group. I don't remember having a lot of problems there, even though I was far from the coolest kid. And, I got over my fear of the dark by going over on sleepovers with kids who didn't have night lights and kids who didn't put the hall light on. And it was like, hey, I sleep with all the lights off. You're in my room. Go to sleep. Quit being a faggot. Don't be a pussy, right? And it didn't have anything to do with homophobia or misogyny. It was just fucking deal with it. And that was character building for me. And I don't know if that's part of what's wrong with millennials, because I gotta admit, from what little I see on social media, I'm not a big social media guy. I'm not on Twitter, whatever. A lot of that was a lot of the really ridiculous PC stuff, social justice warrior stuff, I noticed was coming from much younger people than me. People at least 6 or 7, 8 years younger than me, if not more so. I mean, the feminism fad is really big among teenagers. Spoiled ones who grew up with tablets and high-speed internet. And parents who didn't want them to play outside as if they wanted to. This was Xbox and Facebook. Fuck that shit, right? And these were also kids who were very, very coddled by the school system. Very, very protected. And look what's become of them. Talk a little bit about one of my cousins. My oldest cousin is a 21-year-old kid. He goes to an engineering college out in Colorado. He is an extremely good-looking young guy. Probably could be on an Abercrombie and Fitch thing. Is a star baseball player, straight A's and B's, A's and B's then, student, and he's very sheltered as a kid, parent, very religious, single mother for about half of his life, and remarried to a pretty good guy after that, and wasn't allowed to watch what he wanted to, wasn't allowed to listen to what he wanted to. And the kid is not very respectful of women. He's kind of into that like that hoe over there culture, and he doesn't even listen to rap music or anything like that. Kid loves country. It's Colorado, and very into masculinity and shit. And I don't think that came from being taught not to respect women, but I think it came from being very sheltered, so that when he went out and had his own freedom, he started with a baseline of just non-exposure. And there's a rumor, in every town about the preacher's daughter, about the serial killer who didn't talk much. Very sheltered people are weird. I mean, I can only speak from my personal experience, but sheltered kids that I was around growing up were the kids who were the pyromaniacs who abused animals and talked about fucked up shit. And meanwhile, I was raised on Beavis and Butthead, violent action movies. Once I had cable around the age of 9 or 10, I had HBO and Showtime in Cinemax, otherwise known as Skinemax, so I was exposed to pornography even before I had the internet, when I was at a very young age, and that didn't turn me into a person who devalued women or a violent person, because, I was raised on video games and Duke Nukem and Doom and all these crass or either ultra-violent or very misogynistic video games. And I was raised on movies that were very unrealistic. And it didn't make me a macho dude bro. It didn't make me desensitized to violence. And it didn't make me hate women. So I gotta ask you, man. Are the people these days who are really into this PC culture and social justice warriors, are they coddled? Are they brainwashed? Were they raised in a school where they weren't allowed to compete or act out in any way at all, and weren't able to express themselves? What has caused this wave of 14 to 18-year-olds in this age, kids that are at least 10 years younger than me, that just have these really strange ideas about how they're supposed to treat other people? Bunch of middle-class white kids who are talking to me about being a misogynist or being a racist. And I'm like, what do you even know about real misogyny? What do you even know about real violence? Because, I grew up kind of spoiled till about the age of 8 or 9. Probably about 8. And then, my mother lost her job and I was raised by a single parent, and we ended up moving to basically Little Mexico, in a town in Colorado where I was El Gringo Niño, the little white brat. And the cool culture there was fucking Sereno 13 gangbangers and gangster rap music. And, I was around kids who didn't have cable, didn't have cell phones, didn't have internet, and kicked the shit out of each other, out in the playgrounds for fun. A little bit of trading Pokemon cards in between, but mostly kicking the shit out of each other. And it didn't turn me into a bad person. And I don't know exactly where I'm going with this, but I'm just like, is it really good to shelter your kids? And is it really good to treat your kids like a special snowflake and expose them to literally no adversity? And then introduce them to a world that's so overly concerned with racism and sexism and xenophobia and homophobia and all this shit. And they either go full blown conservative or full blown Marxist. And I gotta know, like, where are the young centrists at? I mean, that's all I got to say. And I'm very curious about your guys' upbringing, when you grew up, and what brought you to being who you are. And how do you feel about people younger than yourself? So let me know in the comments if you want, and have a good day.